There we go, how to safely deploy AI copilots. So while I'm stalling as everybody comes in, it's the easiest thing in the world for a security vendor to say, my name is Brian, I'm the field CTO for Varonis, which is why we're in the partner track. It's the easiest thing in the world for me or anybody else to say X, Y, or Z is top of mind. 10 years ago, it was ransomware. Sometimes it's insider threats. Sometimes it's nation-state actors. Sometimes it's supply chain hacks. AI copilots, Gen AI, but AI copilots specifically, I've never seen anything that's been more top of mind since I've been doing this. And I've been doing this job for about 15 years. I was in IT and security before that. So the fact that this room is about to get really, really packed, and then it's getting a little hot in here, is because all of you, I think, want to know how to safely deploy AI copilots. I've been talking about this really since Copilot for 365 went GA in November of last year. And slowly, over the course of the next few months, every meeting that I had turned into a meeting about copilots. I have to give you a disclaimer. Also, I work for a technology company, and there's a chance that I might utter something about forward-facing statements. Since this is a public venue, we're all friends here. All right, let's get started. Every conversation about generative AI is really a conversation about data. We're at RSA this year, so we're thinking about security. When it comes to security, data is really what we care about. I used to joke, and I still do sometimes. Anybody here from the East Coast? A few hands go up. So you know TD Bank. So for those of you that aren't on the East Coast, there's this bank in the East Coast, TD Bank. And TD Bank, they're great. I just rode the TD Fibro bike tour on Sunday. They're great, but they have these pens, these green pens, the little triangles, right? And they are everywhere. 20 years ago, I went to my grandmother's house in the Bronx, and she signed for a package. What did she sign with? A green TD Bank pen. They're everywhere. Nobody breaks into a bank to steal the pens. They're after money. We're worried about threat actors. We're worried about data protection. We're worried about incident response. We're worried about time to detection and time to response. We're worried about risk. We're worried about privacy. We're worried about security. That means we're worried about data. We have controls at every layer. Security is like an onion. We've got endpoints. We've got identity controls. We've got DLP. We've got perimeter controls. Maybe we've got an MSSP. But the target is always data. I don't know how someone's going to get in. I don't know if they're going to phish one of your users. They're going to own one of your endpoints. They're going to take advantage of a supply chain hack. I don't know if they're a nation-state actor. I don't know if they're an insider that's already there. I don't know how they're going to get in, but I know where they're going. They're going after data. The only controls that really matter are the controls on the data itself. It's a great quote from Jensen. Cybersecurity is inherently a data problem. Couldn't agree more. What I disagree is with the second half of his sentence. The more data the enterprise can process, the more events they can detect and address. That is true to a certain extent. But Jensen, of course, is peddling hardware that processes lots of data. So of course he's going to say that. The problem with trying to secure data with more events and more data is that it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack by throwing more hay at it. That doesn't necessarily work. But the first part of this sentence is true. Cybersecurity is a data problem. He's talking about it in terms of the telemetry that we get. I think about it in terms of data is what we're really trying to protect. You're all here because at this time last year, you might have wanted to know about Gen AI for security. Now, though, you're realizing I need security for Gen AI. Because Microsoft Copilot for 365, which is the lens that we're going to focus on today, has the potential to be. I'm not going to be like Microsoft and categorically tell you that it will be, but it might be the most powerful productivity tool for knowledge workers since what? Email? The typewriter? I ran this by some people this morning, some smart people I know. One of them said the printing press. I was like, I don't know how many office workers, knowledge workers we had when the printing press was invented. But we need tools to help us be better knowledge workers, sure. Because imagine, I need an assistant. We all need an assistant. Imagine that you had a robotic 24/7 assistant that could summarize meetings, identify action items, help you find the most relevant emails and data, help you draft, presentations, help you draft emails, help you figure out what you're supposed to be doing, help you manage your calendar. That would be amazing. We all need that because we live in a world where things move very fast. We all need an assistant. And these copilots promise us that that's exactly what we're going to get. Turn on Microsoft Copilot for 365, and now you've got a robotic, intelligent, 24/7 assistant that is always available to you. You want to find that one email that you know related to this one project, but you can't remember the specific word that was in the email or who it came from, just describe it. Copilot will go out and find it for you. You need to draft a presentation for a conference that you're going to. Maybe you're speaking about how to safely deploy AI copilots. You just ask Copilot, give me a draft of this. It's going to do 80% of the work for me. You have meetings after meetings after meetings after meetings, and you want somebody to help you summarize what happened, build action items for you, show you relevant data, even draft the responses to all your team members. That's the promise of Copilot. Because these copilots sit at the intersection of all of the interfaces that we use as knowledge workers, our phones, our laptops, the Office applications, Outlook, and all of the data that we've got access to. All of the data that's in my OneDrive, and all of the emails that are in my inbox, and all the stuff that's in all those SharePoint sites that I'm a part of. And at this point, post-2020, I'm a member of something like 330 teams. I don't have any idea what's going on in all those teams, but you know who does? Copilot. Copilot's going to help me. Copilot's also going to help me use and analyze and create data in all the applications that we are connecting into the Microsoft Graph, like Salesforce and GitHub and Jira. Copilot's going to make us dramatically more productive, right? It has the promise to make all of our jobs that much easier. It has the promise of making our company more money, because now we're, according to Microsoft, 100 to 400% more productive. We could see an average revenue increase by companies that use Copilot of 4%. So why aren't we all using this right now? This went GA in November of last year. Why don't all of you have Copilot for 365 licenses? Why isn't Microsoft saying, we are making tens of billions of dollars because everybody is using this? Who doesn't want ChatGPT for all of their data? I will tell you why. Because I've spent the last 6 months talking to Microsoft, talking to integrators, talking to consultants, talking to investment analysts, talking to investors, AI investors, talking to industry analysts, talking to dozens and dozens of CISOs and security teams. And you know why we're not all using this right now? Security and privacy. Security and privacy. I'll tell you a story. Back in December, I met a CISO of a Wall Street bank. And we were talking to her because we were talking about potentially doing a data risk assessment for her. And we'd sent an email and said, hey, are you worried about deploying AI copilots? Can we pick your brain, get your thoughts, and maybe talk to you about how we're thinking about some of this problem? She said, sure. So I met her, and she told me a really interesting story. She's the CISO of a big Wall Street bank. They've got a Microsoft ELA. Microsoft says, hey, we've got this great Copilot for 365. Imagine ChatGPT for all your data. It's going to make your people dramatically more productive. Do you want it? They said, yes, please. This is exactly what we need, because they're a bank. And I used to work at UBS. That was my last job before I came to Varonis. I used to work at UBS. At a bank, if you can make the people that work at the bank more productive, guess what the bank does? The bank makes more money. And she thought, okay, I've got this Copilot, it's in pilot, it's in IT, we're playing with it, what metaphor do you want to use? Kicking the tires, dipping our toes in the water, we're trying it out, we're seeing. But if you really want to see if this can realize the promise of productivity, who do you give it to? Who at a bank can you make more productive so that the bank can measurably make more money? What's the best way to measure the ROI of a productivity tool? You know who you give it to? You give it to your traders. This is a big bank, they've got a trading floor. She said, all right, let's see if this actually works. If I give this to my traders, that should make them more productive. If the traders are more productive, we're going to make more money. This should be relatively easy in terms of soft ROI to actually manage, or measure, I should say. So she did that. Now, what do traders do? Traders do a lot of research. Traders are trying to make good decisions. Traders are trying to get an edge on everybody else, and now they've got this tool, Copilot, that's going to help them use all the data that they've got access to. This is a big bank. They've got research teams. They've got analysis teams. These traders have internal groups that are creating models, that are doing analysis, and now Copilot is going to help them. So it's one of the first things that these traders did in order to be more productive. They asked, what do our employees invest in? We're a big bank. We hire smart people. What do smart people invest their money in? That's going to help us. That's going to give us an edge. And I don't need to do the analysis myself. I've got Copilot. I'm just going to ask it a question. We're going to see what it comes back. Now, the CISO, because she's very smart, and she's doing a pilot, is keeping an eye on what these people are doing and what's coming back, because she was afraid of something. And what was she afraid of? So these traders started asking questions. What are our employees investing? And you know what Copilot gave them? Lists, names, addresses, social security numbers, 401k account numbers, positions, and amounts of all of their employees. She said, this is a privacy nightmare. And she immediately turned it off. The Copilot pilot was back in pilot. Was it because all of these traders were suddenly insider threats that she didn't know about? No. They were just trying to do their job. They were just trying to be more productive. Every Copilot pilot is stuck in pilot because of the privacy and security issues. What can you actually do? We have a live Copilot lab where we do this live. So this is a Copilot environment. I've asked it for information on new employees, and what's Copilot doing? Exactly what it's supposed to do. It's going out and finding data. It's analyzing it. It's summarizing it for me. It's helping me find the most relevant information because it's trying to make me more productive. Why does this happen? Microsoft provides all of the controls that you need to make sure that people shouldn't have access to data that they don't need, right? We've got ways to lock things down, surely. So the way Copilot works is you input a prompt from wherever you're going to input a prompt. And by the way, I guarantee you that Copilot prompt is everywhere now. Go look at how many, I have 7 or 8 Microsoft apps on my phone. I think all of them have a Copilot prompt, right? All of the Office applications, whether it's the Fat client or it's the web client or you're in Edge, that Copilot prompt is just everywhere. So we make a prompt. And then what happens? Well, Copilot can only use the security model that you've got. So it's going to go out, and technically the way this works is there's something called the Microsoft Graph, which is all the relationships between the entities and objects like data. Then you've got Copilot builds this, what's called the semantic index on top of this graph. So it builds an index of all of the relevant content. So it's going to go and gather all of the content based on your Microsoft 365 permissions. Now I'm a member of 340-something team sites. Each one of those is a SharePoint site. Each one of those has its own SharePoint directory. But I can click share on any file or any folder. So each file and folder has its own set of access controls with those shared links. I have the ability, if I wanted to create a link that anybody in the company could use, or guests or external users or anybody in the internet. Copilot's going to say, great, you have access to all of this stuff. Then I'm going to take all that content, send it to the LLM, and then there's a responsible AI check done at the end. Now here's the problem. Copilot can only use the security model that you've got. But if people have access to way too much, like those traders that had access for some reason to probably spreadsheets in an HR site somewhere or in a team site, something that was open to everybody, who knows? Copilot's going to say, hey, you've got access to this. This looks really relevant to what you're trying to do. I'm going to give it to you. Microsoft publishes a cloud permissions report. And I think this does a good job of summarizing some of the challenges that we face. What they said when they did their analysis of cloud data and application platforms is that most identities have access to way too much. And a lot of these permissions are high risk, meaning that potentially really sensitive information, stuff that could do us damage, is open to way too many people. And most of the permissions that we have, we don't actually use. Think about the last time that you clicked share and shared a link with somebody. And then you probably got the notification that they used the link. How often do you think they ever use that link again? How long do those links stay around? How much of the access you personally have do you actually use on a daily basis? Now, answer the question for everybody in the company, and answer the question, by the way, for all of the applications and other platforms that are connected together via APIs. So surely we've got to have a way to solve this. Copilot's going to use the security model that we have in place. What does Microsoft say that you should do? Well, when I was building this seminar, when I was starting to think seriously about this last year, I actually Googled how to prepare for Copilot. And Microsoft has a great page, how to prepare for Copilot. A lot of it is focused on things like your IaaS configurations in Azure, sometimes site configurations. But halfway down the page, there's this great little section that says permissions and content management best practices. And in the middle of that paragraph, Microsoft says, for many organizations, content oversharing and governance can be a challenge. I want to let that sink in. For many organizations, content oversharing and governance can be a challenge. That is the understatement of the millennia. Think about it. we've got a platform, Microsoft 365, that is designed to make collaboration frictionless. If I want one of you or somebody in my company to have access to this presentation, which is sitting in my OneDrive, actually I think this copy is on the laptop, but you know what I mean. I don't have to call IT and create a new group. I don't have to open a ticket. I don't have to have your account stuck in some entitlement or in some AD group or Azure AD group. I don't have to get you access to something. I click share, and I share it with you. And I can do that for any document. I can do it for folders. I can create a team. I can share data with you from a team that you're not even in. I can share data from anywhere. Does it matter where this presentation sits? Do you care when you get the link? Do you ever actually check? No. You get the link, you open it, and I'm not sending copies. You're just accessing the data from my OneDrive or from the team site or from the chat or wherever it might be, because it doesn't matter anymore. Collaboration should be frictionless. That's why we're so productive. By the way, I don't want to go back to the old world. I don't want to work in a way where if I lose my laptop, suddenly I'm out of commission and all my data is gone. I like it. I can access anything from anywhere. I can share with anybody. We can collaborate together. I'm dramatically more productive. But that means for many organizations, content oversharing and data governance can be a challenge. Because who on earth is going to go look? You have more SharePoint sites than you have employees. Each of those SharePoint sites has document libraries and files and folders. Each of those has their own access controls. And to even answer the question, who has access to this? You've got to go to Enter ID and look at all the entitlements and groups there. You've got to go to the SharePoint site, look at that directory. SharePoint groups can contain AD groups. You can have on-premises users. You have to look at every single shared link, and every shared link can contain distribution lists or other groups. So now, some of you might be thinking, this is a data ownership problem. The business should be making decisions. This isn't a security problem. Good luck. Now, I'm going to go into more detail there, but good luck with that. Now, of course, Microsoft says, and we agree, use Purview. Because if you use Purview, and this falls under the big umbrella of DLP, you can make sure that this data is encrypted. You can apply rights management, so you can piss your users off when they can't copy and paste out of the documents. You can block things from being sent or shared. You can apply retention and disposition. All good things. Those are all very useful, very practical security controls. Two problems. One, none of that solves the oversharing and governance problems. It doesn't solve the fact that way too much data is open to way too many people. Two, who is going to put all these labels on all these files? I was talking with an integrator, and we started the conversation by them saying, we have 6 Copilot deployment projects that are all on hold because of all these issues. And one of their engineers asked me, well, what about Purview? I said, Purview is great. Except how many of your customers actually have labels in all their files? And he laughed and said, none. I've looked at a lot of environments, at a lot of enterprises. I have yet to see a single company that has labels on more than 5% of their data. So these are useful controls, but they do not solve the problems that we're talking about. Now, we're at RSA. I've been talking about privacy. I've been talking about PII and financial information. But that's not what you guys really want to see. Now let's imagine that somebody that knows what they're doing gets a hold of Copilot. What can someone really do? Well, part of the problem with files is that they are by their nature cross-functional. Remember, data can live anywhere and be accessible by anybody, so role-based access doesn't work. Things tend to fail open. It is easier for us to let access controls be more open than try to block everything because we don't want to get in anybody's way. Our business exists to be a business. So things tend to fail open. Also, lots of really interesting information ends up in places that you don't expect. Like, for example, people creating PowerShell scripts or setting up connections to applications. So I don't need to ask Copilot about PII or employee data. I can just say, hey, are there any credentials out there? Copilot's going to say, yes, sir. Let me go find that for you. And maybe there's a PowerShell script somewhere. And now, listen, I'm not that technical. Let's let Copilot do the work for me. So just summarize all those credentials for me and put them in a bulleted list. Done. Now I can move laterally. I can elevate privileges. I can get access to data and systems that I didn't. Part of the challenge here, too, isn't just that data stores are built for collaboration. All of our applications are designed to connect together, too. Anybody here use Salesforce or their company use Salesforce? Yeah? So every time you onboard a new application, at some point somebody says, does this connect to Salesforce? Right? So everything is connected together with APIs. Threat actors know that too. So forget the credentials. I'll go find clear text logins and passwords, but what about the API keys, the tokens, the connection strings that might be out there? Because heaven forbid a developer might be lazy and stick it in a text file attached to a Teams chat. Right? That would never happen, but if it did, Copilot doesn't care. Copilot's going to go find me. I can even ask Copilot to write the code for me to use these tokens and connection strings. Makes my job really easy. So let's put all this together. Employees have access to way too much. This is simply a fact of life, because we use data platforms like Microsoft 365 that make collaboration easy. Everything fails open. Nobody cares where data lives anymore, so role-based access, not that it ever worked, really doesn't work anymore. All these applications are connected together. Employees just have access to way too much. You can also add applications have access to way too much, because usually we have as many service accounts as we have employees, and those service accounts also have access to way too much. Our data usually does not have a label. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you the first half of the story, actually. So I did some work with a casino. This is a casino you have all heard of. And their headquarters, unsurprisingly, is on the Las Vegas Strip. And if any of you have been to Vegas in the last 20 years, you know getting down to and traversing the Strip is a giant pain. It always was, but it's way more so now. So they put DLP in place that prevented their users from accessing sensitive data if it was marked as confidential. Totally cromulent control. Totally appropriate. You should not be able to access sensitive data using your personal devices. You know what their users discovered? That if they marked files as public, they could work from home. Chew on that for a while. So your data either doesn't have a label or it might be mislabeled, because users do not like pop-ups and things blocking them. So sometimes they find a way around your control. Insiders can use these tools to very quickly and painlessly find and exfiltrate data. I don't have to go searching through all the teams in a company or the SharePoint sites that look juicy. I don't have to crack into someone's OneDrive. I just use Copilot. It's going to tell me where all this stuff is, and it's going to summarize it for me. It's going to make my job easier. A threat actor, good luck. This is the greatest thing ever invented for a sophisticated threat actor. Now, here's the big problem. I remember dozens of CISOs and security teams over the last few months. Actually, I've been doing this for 15 years at Varonis now, so this is part of what I do. You know how often I meet a security team that has more active projects than they have members of the security team? I see some of you nodding. Yeah, you know what that's like. So, right-sizing access. Imagine the Herculean effort it would take to go through and actually figure out where important stuff is, who and what has access to it, and make sure that only the right people have access to it. I was privileged enough to talk to a head of privacy a few weeks ago, and she had done a data assessment with a DSPM. And what they did is they went out and they scanned, and the scan took like 6 months. And they went and they tried to find all instances of sensitive information. And she said, and I said, well, what's the plan? She said, well, they're going to give us findings, and then we're going to take those findings, and we're actually going to connect it into our ticketing system. We're going to open tickets for the findings, put those in front of the data owners, and then they're supposed to say, is this appropriate or not? We're making business content a business decision. I said, great, how did it go? She said, well, we ended up with 293 million findings. It broke ServiceNow when they tried to open the tickets, and nothing ever got done, so we just deleted that database and started over. There is no team that you can hire to go fix this problem. And let's say you did. Let's say you actually did. Well, these tools are going to make creating new data even easier, so the problem is going to get worse faster than you could ever possibly fix it. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because I'm at the Directory of Security Architecture at a streamer. Many of you probably have this app on your phone right now. And I met them in their office about 8 weeks ago. And I went through this, and I got to this point, and he said, stop. You're talking about permissions and access controls. I said, yes, exactly. He said, we've had this problem for 20 years, right? I'm not really telling you anything new. I'm not really telling you anything that you don't already know is a problem. But what has changed? One, this problem is bigger than you realize and getting worse faster than you could possibly fix it. And two, in the past, you might be able to say, I know it's a problem, but I've got other priorities. What has changed now, and what this director of security architecture told me, is that I've always known this is a problem, but we have a board-level mandate to deploy Copilot by the end of 2024, so it's a problem I've got to suddenly solve right now. Now imagine you have to solve it, and you've got 293 million findings. What do you do about it? How do you actually, safely, and quickly deploy these AI copilots? Because on the face of it, it feels like we have two choices. One is, I'm going to turn this on and hope nothing bad happens. Call that the ostrich defense, right? If I don't know about it, maybe I won't get fired. Except, you know what's going to happen. You know it. I just showed you, and I'll keep showing you. You know what's going to happen. So that's choice one, do nothing. Choice two is, you know what? This is too dangerous, we're not going to use it. And suddenly all of your competitors figure out a way to do this, and they are moving faster than you are, and they are giving their employees better tools. They're retaining more talent. Their people are more productive. They're making more money, and their costs are lower. That's not a really good option either. All right, so what's the real option? In order to solve a problem, you need to know that it's there. I told you at the beginning, this is a data problem, right? So we need to know about our data. You're at RSA, now this is my 10th or 12th, I don't know, RSA. The word visibility gets thrown around like candy, or like socks, or whatever they're giving away down on the show floor, right? Everybody loves to talk about visibility. So I'm going to start by talking about visibility, but I want to define it very, very carefully. We are talking about solving a security problem with data. That means we need very specific types of visibility when it comes to data. Just identifying what is sensitive does not address your visibility challenge. It is certainly part of it. If you don't know where those credentials are, how could you possibly lock them down? If you don't know where all that employee 401k data is, how could you possibly figure out when people are using it strangely? Sensitivity is important. So is accurate classification. People undersell this sometimes. There are a lot of people out there that will fill your brain with dreams of machine learning and AI-powered classification. I would ask you to be very careful about, I'm going to just be blunt, about false positives. Because if your classification identifies lots and lots and lots of false positives, guess what? You're not going to trust it, you're not going to use it, it's basically pointless. In fact, it might cost you more time than you get back. And that's a problem because we're all stretched pretty thin. So sensitivity is one part of it. But so are, you can think of it as configuration and security posture, right? How is our IaaS environment configured? How are all these sites configured? Do we have MFA on? Are we blocking external access? That's all really important. But so are the permissions. But here's the problem. The permissions mean I got to map all of the directories. I've got to map, and that's tens of thousands of directories because each SharePoint site has its own directory. I've got to connect those with the accounts. I've got to look at all those shared links. I've got to connect those with all of the users and groups. I've got to unravel and everything and build those relationships. Yeah, you do. And you need to watch how everything is used. How do people authenticate? Sure, that's important. But what data are they touching? And when you put all this together, a couple things happen. One, you have a complete view of everything. Data sampling works really, really well in a database. Because I can look at a table, I can look at the first 2 lines of a table, and if I find a social or something else in there, I know that table contains sensitive data. Done. Data sampling works really great for structured systems, for IaaS. Data sampling is a disaster when you try to apply it to files. Just look at the header. That doesn't tell me anything, because the header's probably copied from the last document that this person made. Just look at the tag. Well, we've talked about that. Just look at the 1 or 10 files, 10% of the files in a directory. That's useless. Right? Every directory that I have, some of it is highly sensitive, some of it's not. Sometimes the directory tells me or not. It needs to be complete. It needs to be contextual because all of these cannot exist in a silo. You can't have, I know everything about my sensitivity and I know everything about the permissions and posture. If you don't combine the two, you cannot measure risk. And if you're not monitoring how data is actually being used, you're going to spend 6 to 12 months scanning everything and then have to do it all over again. So, you need visibility that combines all of the above. When you do that, suddenly you start to get some outcomes. You know where you're at risk, because you know where sensitive data is you know who and what has access to it. You also know where it's exposed. You know whether there are any third-party applications that some business unit called up a SaaS and just installed without you knowing about it because they hit OK on their phone, and now you've got a third-party application that's got access to your entire 365 tenant. Ask me how I know. Third-party applications, you know all of the access controls, and you know whether any of your data has existing labels. This is a starting point. One of the problems that we're facing here is that we're trying to solve unknown unknowns. You can't fix those unless you know about them. So you need to map the entire environment. Then, well, Microsoft says use Purview. Let's use Purview. So when we find data, if it's sensitive, let's see if there's a label on it. If the label is wrong, let's fix it. If the label is missing, let's apply it. And if we want to, let's use rights management to block Copilot from ever returning anything that's in that document, regardless of the level of access. Remember that casino? They started doing this with automation, and now they automatically fix downgraded tags, they automatically apply tags, they were able to re-enable their DLP enforcement, and now their users are behaving because they have guardrails in place. This is important. Purview and DLP are critical as part of your overall security stack, your overall security posture, but it needs to be automatic and it needs to work at scale. Then what you need to do is get rid of the really, really big problems. Because when you do this, suddenly you're going to see API keys and authentication tokens that are open to everybody, employee 401k data that's open to everybody, links that widely expose huge amounts of sensitive data. You know what you should do before you use Copilot? Blow them all away. But make sure you're watching how they're used so you don't break anything. We're always afraid of the big red button. We're always afraid of enforcement. Because in security, sometimes the worst thing that we can do is get in the way of a business process. That's why activity is absolutely critical to this. Once you do that, people start using Copilot. Maybe you've got a Copilot pilot. You start asking it for credentials. What's it going to return? I'm sorry, Dave. I can't do that. You don't have access to any of this stuff. Are we done? No, we're not done. Right? We want to turn on DLP. We want to encrypt the really highly sensitive stuff. We want to block. We want to apply rights management. We want to do this at the endpoint, at the perimeter. Maybe we've got a CASB, like Defender for Cloud Apps. Maybe we're using Microsoft Purview information protection. Maybe we've got a suite of DLP products. Now that all of our files are labeled, all of this stuff is going to work. But we're not done yet, because now you still need to know what people are doing. So you need to monitor the Copilot activity. Just because you've locked your door doesn't mean you don't have a security camera. Just because you've got two-factor and a good password on your bank account doesn't mean you don't want fraud protection. So you need to monitor how Copilot's being used. You need to monitor the data. You need to monitor the prompts. You need to monitor the responses. All of this is critical. When someone asks the question, what are people using Copilot for, you need to be able to do this. And you need to gather this information from a variety of different sources. But when you combine this together with the context of permissions and the context of sensitivity and the context of profiling, what do people normally do, and what do they normally access, and who do they collaborate with, and which devices do they use, and where is most of the data that they actually touch? You know what you get to do? You get to get a small number of highly contextual alerts. The trick here is separating signal from noise. That's why I have a little bit of a quibble with Jensen's quote at the beginning, that security is a data problem. Throwing more data at a problem tends to generate a lot of noise. So the really hard thing to do is, if you're going to be monitoring and alerting, and you're going to be monitoring and alerting, context is key. It's one thing to know that somebody's using Copilot. It's another thing to know entirely that somebody is using Copilot to ask about employee data, or API keys, or application keys, or what have you. So context really matters, but once you're monitoring everything effectively, you can detect when people are using Copilot strangely. You can detect when people create something highly sensitive and share it with everybody. You can see the specific data that is being accessed. Think about that. If you have a Copilot pilot going right now, ask yourself the question, if I needed to know exactly what files were referenced by all the prompts that Brian made over the last week, how would I answer that question? Could you answer that question? Was any of those files, were any of them sensitive? Were any of them labeled? And if something does happen, like somebody creating a lot of sensitive data and widely sharing it, or accessing something inappropriately, we should be able to apply a label as a response to an alert. But we're not done. Remember that Herculean effort? Well, just because we've blown away the high risk doesn't mean we don't want robots to go out and continue to enforce these guardrails. Because again, even if you throw your entire team at this problem, your entire team cannot be doing this for the rest of history. They have other things to do. So we need to fight fire with fire a little bit. We need, and I hesitate to say we need Gen AI for security, although this can be a big part of it, but we need automation. We need to continue to revoke excessive access, because it's going to come back. It's like mowing your lawn. We need to continue to fix labels. We need to continue to fix misconfigurations. When Derek in marketing signs up for a SaaS application and connects it to your entire tenant and gives this startup access to all of your data, we need to identify that and lock it down. Sorry, Derek. We need to enforce lifecycle and residency. Make sure data is where it's supposed to be. Delete it when we don't need it. So summing all this up, if you haven't started piloting Copilot, somebody's probably asking you to, or if you've got a Copilot pilot that's in pilot, we want to turn on the lights, figure out what we have, fix the labels, get rid of the biggest risks so that we don't have a complete disaster right at the beginning, figure out who's using what data and where our most sensitive data is. Again, I hate to use the term because it's so cliche, but where are the crown jewels? Who's got access to it? Make sure that you're using DLP effectively, turn on enforcement. Now you can start, it's all crawl, walk, run. We want people to start using Copilot, but once we turn it on and they start using it, monitor that activity, see what they're doing. If there's anything weird, we should know about it. Reducing time to detection and time to response is critical here. And we need robots, we need automation that will continue to enforce access control policies, that will continue to enforce guardrails, that will make sure that as we let people collaborate, they're doing it safely. Because people make mistakes, and threat actors behave badly. You can reduce all your data security risk to 0. You know why? You know how? Delete all your data. No more problem. You can't do that. Just like you can't just empty the bank account. I've done this through the lens of Copilot for 365. But that's not the only Copilot, is it? You've got Einstein Copilot for Salesforce. You've got Gemini for Google. Every single platform that you've got, if they don't have one now, they are building one. And all of the same problems that I've just talked about exist everywhere else. We could do this, we could rewind it, back it up, and just put everything in the context of Salesforce. Now you got to look at profiles and permission sets and permission set groups and object settings and sharing rules and mute permissions, let alone trying to find where all the sensitive data is. And your Salesforce team, God bless them, their first job, their number one priority is keeping Salesforce working. Their second and third and fourth priorities are keeping Salesforce working. They don't know who's got access to what. They'll tell you, no, there's no sensitive data there. Yeah, sure. So we got to worry about this wherever we have data. And that's before we even talk about building AI workloads on top of Snowflake and Databricks and all the databases that you have in RDS. You're going to have to solve a version of this problem over and over and over again. This is why automation, built on visibility, that focuses on the data is absolutely critical. And if you haven't done one, if you have a Copilot pilot in pilot, or you're thinking about it, at the very least, go to your partners, go to a vendor, and say, will you do a readiness assessment for us? But remember, what does success look like? Because this is really all about outcomes. You're not going to do a science project. We don't have time to run science projects. Maybe some of us do, because you're so big, you've got a security team of 700 people. But most of us don't have the time and resources to run science projects. So define an outcome. What is the outcome? What visibility do we need? What controls do we need to automate? Where are our integration points? How is that going to work? And how much manual work will it actually take? Because none of you have enough people to go and fix 293 million findings. It is impossible. You need to do this automatically. I'm going to tell you a story now, because I'm a vendor, and you're in a vendor session, so I get to tell you a story about us being a vendor. We did a readiness assessment very similar to this to a financial with a financial services firm and their 365 tenant back in January. And as part of the readiness assessment, we scanned 1 million files. We found 120,000 of them were highly sensitive, which wasn't surprising. They're a financial firm. What was more surprising to them was the 57,000 shared links that exposed that sensitive data to literally every single person in the company. This is exactly the kind of thing that will be exploited by Copilot, but they had a board-level mandate to deploy Copilot. Now imagine that you've got 57,000 findings. What are you going to do? Identify 57,000 data owners? Hire 57,000 interns? It's not going to work. They used us. We went through this process. Now, I don't know how long they would have estimated to do this on their own. We got it done in 10 days. My two favorite numbers from this case study. First one, 99.8% reduction in risk. That highlights when we did the analysis of how this exposure was actually being leveraged, a very, very small percentage of it were actually tied to a current business process. So when we ran the automation to reduce their exposure, we did it safely. So that's my first favorite number. My second favorite number is 0. Because the biggest fear that we often have when it comes to automation is, what is this going to break? Who is going to call me screaming? What executive is going to be down my throat next week because we got in the way of some process? 0. 0 help desk tickets. We were able to reduce exposure measurably based on risk measurements that we started with. We did it automatically in 10 days, and nobody complained. That's an outcome. One of the things that we often struggle with in security is showing the value of what we've done tangibly. How do you measure the effectiveness of a security program? Well, Martha, we haven't been breached in 6 months. Good for us. That's a good metric. But it doesn't tell you the success of a program. It just tells you haven't been breached. Tangible results are absolutely critical, and this is a good representation of that. So I told you, or I was talking to somebody before, I built this presentation to be 25 minutes, and they gave me 50. So I'm all done now. I hope this has been valuable for you. I'm going to give you a few minutes back. We've got, I think, 5 minutes for Q&A if you want to ask any questions. But thank you all. And if there's a couple of mics, if anybody's got questions here. I've been doing this for months now. Look at you all. If you got a question, go to the mic.
So in your slide for before Copilot, the very first one was deploy Varonis.
Yeah.
You're a vendor, you're not a product. So what are the real options as far as, like, can you break out that one thing for, instead of deploy Varonis, wrap up what Varonis would do versus what would you need to do on your own in that one bullet?
So here's how I'll define it. What I should have said is deploy Varonis, instead of deploy Varonis, is find sensitive data, map all the permissions, and start monitoring data activity. However you do that, do it. If you'd like to see how we do it, come to our booth. I'll show you how to do it. Hope that answers your question. Oh, that is a great question. Where is our booth? If you would like to see more, if you would like to see this as a demo, booth 5658 North Expo Hall. I'll be down there. People on my team are down there. We've got tons of engineers. By the way, one thing I want you to take away. It is easy to build slides. It is hard to build product. Keep that in mind. All right. Yeah.
2 questions. The first one, so you're recommending Purview and Varonis.
Yes.
They overlap in functionality. Could you kind of distinguish between?
Yeah. So the question is, where do we overlap with Purview? The only overlap is in the identification of sensitive data. Okay. Purview is really a perimeter control. It helps with the blocking. It helps with enforcement of controls. Purview doesn't do anything to actually help you solve the governance and access and alerting problems. Okay. So we can use the Purview classification. We're better at it, but that's really the only overlap. We're available on the Azure Marketplace, and we integrate directly with Purview. The labels that we apply are the Purview labels, so all those controls will work. We're happy to show you that in detail.
Okay. And then the other question is, could you actually restrict Copilot during a pilot phase to just certain directories, folders?
Yes. So the question is, could you restrict Copilot to certain directories? Microsoft gives you the ability with SharePoint whitelisting to limit the Copilot scope to 100 SharePoint sites. The problem is most of us have more SharePoint sites than employees. Yes, you can try to restrict Copilot at the site level. The problem is it dramatically limits the effectiveness of Copilot because nobody really knows where all their data is. And if suddenly Copilot is limited to a subset of your SharePoint sites, it's going to be way less effective and people aren't going to use it. Then you won't realize the ROI of Copilot, and it's not cheap. So we have not seen that be a useful way to actually solve these problems.
Got it.
People want to use the data that they have access to wherever it is. And if you're playing whack-a-mole with SharePoint sites, and again, you're limited to 100, it's not going to work. Okay. Great question. Yeah.
Hi. My question is about the apps that Varonis can actually track on Office 365. So for example, Viva Engage is one of the apps that Microsoft provides. So is Varonis able to show when somebody uses Copilot and posts something sensitive on Viva Engage? How would your product be able to?
It's a really, really good question, and it depends on the
Sure.
app. It depends on, so Copilot will have access to apps that are connected to the Microsoft Graph, and it depends on how that connector was configured, and it depends on what's exposed on the other app side through the Graph APIs for what we would see. So if it's an app that we don't natively support, it depends on all of the above. If it's an app that we natively support, like we support Jira, and we support Slack, and we support Salesforce, we could also see it on the Salesforce side. So the answer is it depends on a few different factors.
Because the problem is Copilot, you cannot restrict which apps it can access,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I know. it's a big problem. Also, when engineers configure the app connections, the most common way is just to leave the app open to everybody and then worry about the app controls, the identity controls on the app side. But that leaves gives Copilot access to everything because the connector is set up for everyone. It's a huge problem.
Thank you.
Got a question. When it comes to Varonis and SIM tools like Exabeam and
Yep.
Splunk and things like that, always in a question like, hey, both does the same thing. What's main differentiates between the Varonises in
The
comparison?
SIM tool is a log aggregator, and trying to solve these problems by throwing more logs at it is like throwing hay at a haystack. It doesn't work. So what we do is we gather behavior where appropriate. We can suck in log behavior from a SIM. Usually we do that for things like domain controller logs that are you want us to analyze as well as your SIM. And then when we generate an alert, we send it to Splunk or to Sentinel or to something else. So what ends up happening is you let Varonis be the expert system for data, and then we provide a very limited number of alerts so that we're not drowning your SIM. We're just saying, hey, Brian's been accessing a lot of sensitive data that he's never looked at before with a device he's never used. Now you can use the SIM for other correlation on behavior streams that we're not looking at, like application and network logs. Hope that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great talk, Brian. Thanks. You mentioned Varonis in the context of Microsoft Security Copilot. A bunch of my team members are building multiple other copilots in the company using Confluence, you name it, what. Is Varonis also helps out in terms of categorizing of this data while you're, like when they're building these RAG applications, in terms of how this data will be used and maybe segmentation of this data, fragmentation for building
The
this
answer
RAG?
is it depends. So it depends on where the data is coming from. Like, so with Confluence, the answer is no, because we're not looking into Confluence yet. Forward-facing statements, stay tuned, we probably will. But if it was in something like Snowflake or Databricks or databases that are in RDS, the answer is yes. We would see those connections, what data is there, how it's being used, which models are using it. So the answer is it depends. I don't want to give you a blanket yes, but we can absolutely help.
So database, you say, like Postgres database, you
Yep.
said yes, like you have a way to,
Yes, we can classify all the data in a Postgres database, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud.
got it. Thank you.
Of course.
Hi. So the best way to prevent a lot of this is not to use it. But did you have any thoughts on how to restrict distributing licenses if you have that ability to?
So there's nothing that we do to restrict the licenses. That's more of a kind of a Microsoft admin problem.
Right.
Yeah, so-
Well, I was thinking for you, did you have any personal thoughts on what requirements to have the license for an end user?
That's a really good question that I haven't thought deeply about, but
Okay.
I'm going to now. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you. I don't know. Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you.
sure. Just make sure they don't have access to too much. That's honestly. All right.
Just
One more,
a
go ahead.
last more question. Do you have any
Bless you.
API throttling or anything when it comes to interact with Copilot?
We solved those issues 5 or 6 years ago. So
Okay.
the answer is no, we're good.
All right.
It's a legitimate question when a vendor says, I'm going to connect to your 365 tenant and start grabbing logs. Yeah, the question was about throttling. We've solved all that, so it's no problem.
So do you detect or treat external data as particularly risky because email, for example, can come from anywhere
Yeah.
and can contain any kinds of attacks?
You're right. And so so now I'm speaking purely from a Varonis perspective. We scan the contents of the attachments and the bodies for emails for sensitivity. We also do machine learning-based phishing detection. So the answer is yes, we can help you with business email compromise because you're right, that's usually the way in. And we become a force multiplier for the other, like the other email security tools or processes that you might have in place, because we're not just doing classification, we also map all of the access and monitor the behavior, and we see the senders and the receivers and what data is there, so the answer is yes, we can help. And that's part of, by the way, when we do, I mean, spoiler alert, whoops, this readiness assessment is obviously something we will do for you. Now, Copilot does not give you access to emails that are outside of your inbox, but we scan everything, including, some of us still have public folders around, you know that? So yeah, we go and find where all the sensitive data is, how it's being used, who and what has access to it, regardless if it's in an inbox or somewhere else. And if you want to see any of this, booth, what did I say? I should know this. 5658 North Expo. Huge booth, easy to see. Thank you.